You've probably seen loads of vocal mixing advice telling you things like you should always high pass at 100 Hertz, only compress your vocals by 2 or 3 dB, clip gain before compression, sidechain your reverbs, use dynamic EQ, make sure that you feel your processing, but you don't hear it. And today I want to show you why I disagree with pretty much all of that. Not because those ideas are wrong or because you shouldn't do them, but because they're not the reason that a vocal works. And I'm going to show you this today using a track that I mixed called Drink to You by Kate Lomas. This song has had millions of streams. It's been played on national radio all across Europe. We performed it at Abbey Road on TV for the BBC here in the UK. But more importantly than any of that, it was recorded in a tiny home studio in a garage on a laptop and mixed on a pair of like 300 quid monitors or something at the time. So this isn't about big budget, perfect conditions, having loads of gear, anything like that. It's just about making the right decisions. Anyway, this is what the track sounds like.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold. So how's it supposed to be? How it's supposed to be? If you were me, you'd see it differently. I only ask cause I'm driving so fast, something's gotta give soon. But when we're burning up, I feel so in love. Tell me every single thing in the world was built for us. I only ask cause I'm driving so fast in this room. But when I drink to you. All the money and the time I lose. All the money and the time I lose.
So when it comes to vocal mixing, my rule number one is know what your vocal is supposed to do. And I talk about this all the time, but I keep repeating it because it's the most important thing that you can understand. To me, this song is about being reckless and maybe feeling a bit hopeless. It's a bit nihilistic in a way, so I wanted the mix to reflect that. It has this driving energy of being in a bit of a whirlwind and everything is just coming at you fast. The instrumental is quite aggressive and everything is on the downbeat. So that means we have to embrace the fact that the vocal is fighting with the instrumental and make that the vibe of the mix. Make it about fighting for attention. To me, that means compress it hard. It means lean into saturation, distortion, excitement. It can't be timid and weak. It has to be upfront and in your face. And you're never gonna get that sound if you're just using like an LA2A with 2 or 3 dB of gain reduction. I'll break down this whole chain properly later on because I've got a couple of different things happening here. But the first thing to notice is I've got this at 1176 in parallel and I'm hitting this hard.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold?
Then on this lead vocal track, I've also got some saturation happening. This is being fed to this lead vocal bus where there's also a limiter, there's decapitator on it. I'm not trying to be subtle here because I don't want to be. That isn't the plan. So have a plan for your mix. And if it's supposed to be loud and aggressive, then compress it, distort it, slam it to the wall if you have to. And if it's supposed to be delicate and soft, then don't do any of that. Or do that if that works. Try things. The spoiler alert is there are no rules. But if we are going to make rules, then my rule number 2 is don't try mixing things that should have been edited. What does that even mean? Well, if we look at this vocal, you can see that, I'm not going to lie, I've done a pretty banging job of editing this vocal. There's nothing that shouldn't be there. Everything is cleaned up. Things are time aligned where they should be. Things are tuned where they should be. There's no unwanted breaths. There's no junk in the vocal. It sounds tight just in the vocal edit itself.
I only ask cause I'm driving so fast in this room. But when I drink to you. All the money and the time I lose. All the money and the time I lose.
The point is, I've spent time, a lot of time, through editing to get the vocals to sound as good as they possibly can before the mixing process has even begun. And if I'm gonna compress the hell out of this vocal, and I'm gonna use loads of saturation and loads of different effects as well, then the vocal needs to be clean, because if it's not, and it's full of unwanted junk like mouth noises and background rumble, all that's gonna happen is the compression and the saturation is gonna make that stuff sound even more audible, and the vocal is just going to be messy. People say to me a lot, I just can't get my vocal to sit in the mix, or it sounds muddy, it's lacking clarity. And then I see their sessions and they've done basically no vocal editing. And I'm like, there you go. Sort that out and you'll probably find you've solved half of your problems. And if you're wondering exactly what I mean by vocal editing, then I posted a video a little while back demonstrating exactly what I do to get a vocal ready for mixing. So if you want to check that out, you can do that after this video. but don't skip this step. So the third and final rule, even though there are no rules, my rule is, and this is the most important bit because this is where it all links together, every mixing move you make has to serve the song. So if we look at the vocal processing that's happening, it looks a bit chaotic and a bit crazy because I have this vocal track here that has some processing on it, then it's sent to this 1176 in parallel, and then that's being fed to this lead vocal bus here, which has some processing on it as well, and then loads of different sends, and it looks a bit chaotic and a bit crazy. But every single thing that's happening on this lead vocal track and on this lead vocal bus is constantly calling back to the plan that we talked about in point 1, where I said you need to have a plan. And that plan in this case was to make the vocal aggressive and upfront and in your face. All of these moves are there to ensure that that is being delivered throughout the whole mix. So what exactly is going on here with this lead vocal? I've muted these sends for now and I've turned off the automation so they don't come back on. So the lead vocal just starts with a bit of corrective EQ. This is an old session, so we're still working with Pro Q2 here. As I always say when I talk about vocal mixing, the first thing you need to do is get rid of any problems that are happening in the mix. I joked at the beginning of this video about high passing at 100 Hertz, but we've done it here because it needed to happen. We're removing a bit of boxiness, taking out some of the harshness, dialing out a little bit of sibilance as well with an EQ at the beginning.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold?
Second in the chain, we have a bit of the SSL channel from Waves. I'm doing more high passing just because I felt like it maybe needed extra cleaning up. We've got a little bit of compression happening, 3:1 ratio, fast attack, short release, taking out a little bit more of that mid-range harshness around about 2K, taking out some of that boxy, stuffy sounding mid-range around about 700 Hertz, taking out about 5 dB there. Let's take a listen to what difference this is making.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars every...
So that's quite subtle, but it's doing enough just to clean the vocal up, tighten it up a bit, and get it ready for us to apply the more aggressive processing because we've dealt with the issues that are in the vocal. Next up, there's some de-essing going on, just dealing with some of the sibilance.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold?
Hitting that pretty hard with the de-esser, but I'm happy to do that. It sounds natural. She has got quite a sibilant voice, and that stuff only comes out even more when you're adding the compression and when you're adding the saturation. So I'm happy to hit that pretty hard there. Then we have a bit of saturation, some Neve 1073 style preamp on this FG73 from Slate Digital, as well as this Hollywood preamp, which I really like the sound of these, the Virtual Tube collection from Slate. Really great sounding saturation that adds character and thickness to vocals. And let's take a listen to what this is doing.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
Again, it's subtle. It's just adding a bit of extra edge and a bit of thickness to that vocal. Then we have the parallel 1176, which is just a separate send. I showed you this earlier. It's an instance of the CLA 76, the black revision from Waves Audio. And then both this lead vocal track and this para vocal bus are being sent to this lead vocal bus and they're being summed there. Then we have more processing happening on that lead vocal bus, plus the effects. And the reason that I do this is just to make sure that the effects are being applied to both the parallel vocal and the lead vocal itself. Because particularly with this parallel vocal, it's louder than the lead vocal itself. So it's taking up more of the mix. So I don't want that to be dry. I want them both to have the same effects, the same reverb, same delays, and for them to be processed together as one single vocal. So that's why they run to this lead vocal bus up here, and then we run the sends off that. This is what difference this parallel send is making.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
Now there's a couple of things here. People might say, well, why don't you just use the mix control? Why are you sending it to a parallel send? The reason for that is because I'm pretty sure that when I mixed this track, the mix control wasn't a feature in the CLA 76. It was just a standard plugin with no mix knob. But also, I prefer to have things on a parallel send. I use this SSL nucleus a lot, so being able to have the parallel send on a fader here just makes such a difference to my workflow, and it allows me to bring it down if it's too loud or blend it in if I need to. It's just a really nice way of working to have it on a fader. So typically, I don't really like to use the mix knob because I just get more joy out of having the parallel stuff on a fader and be able to blend it in. The trade-off is that you do get a jump in level when you engage that parallel send, and there's not really a way around that. You can't level match it properly, but that's fine. I don't really care that much about level matching. I know that it sounds good. The vocal sounds how I want it to, and it helps it sit in the mix. It gives it a bit more clarity. So then all of this is running to this lead vocal bus over here. And the first plugin in this chain is the VEQ from Waves. We're dipping out some more mid-range. We're dipping out some more low mid as well. I'm always constantly just reacting to what I'm hearing. If I make a change and then something else comes up, I just deal with that thing there and then. I don't try and unpick what I've done and go backwards. I like to move forwards all the time, which is why I end up with these changes that seem a bit crazy. It's because I'm just adding something and correcting an issue rather than trying to go back and unpick something. Unless I've gone really wrong and I feel like, oh, actually something earlier on in the chain is really problematic, then I'll go back and undo that. But I like to work forward all the time.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold. So how's it supposed to be? How it's supposed to be? If you were me, you'd see it differently. I only ask cause I'm drink driving so fast, something's gotta give soon.
Again, it's pretty subtle. Nothing that we're doing here is like extreme, other than maybe that parallel compression, the level that it's blended in at. Nothing is really making massive difference on its own. It's all about the sum of these things added up that is what makes the difference and makes the lead vocal sound the way that it does. Then we've got another EQ, once again targeting pretty much the same areas. We're dealing with this low mid thickness, this sort of boxiness, this mid-range harshness, and taking out some of that top end as well. And a lot of people who make vocal mixing tutorials would have you believe that this is wrong and that you shouldn't be working this way and that this is not how professionals work. But let me tell you, this is how I work and it works for me. And that's all that matters. If I'm hearing something, I deal with it. And this is what I keep coming back to all the time. Just react to what's in front of you. There's no right or wrong way of doing things. If you hear something and something makes you feel something, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether you feel like I need to change something or whether you feel like that's really cool, react to that and deal with that. Don't feel like, oh, I should be doing this. Maybe I should be using, right now it feels a bit boxy, but I've already made loads of EQ moves, so I can't make any more EQ moves because I've already got like 3 EQs in the chain or however many I've already got. I shouldn't be adding a 4th EQ because that's not what people do. Well, if that's what you want to do, if it works for you, then just do it. And on that note, here's another EQ. This time we're attenuating a very small amount of low end. We're boosting the top end at 8K with this Pultec style EQ for a bit of smoothness, for a bit of opening the top end, adds the clarity to this vocal. Let's take a listen to what this is doing.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold. So how's it supposed to be? How it's supposed to be? If you were me, you'd see it differently.
It just helps to open up some of the raspiness and the top end in her voice, which helps the vocal cut through the mix a bit more, sit above the track. And again, we're just calling back to that thing of like, I want the vocal to be up front. I want it to be present. I want it to be in your face. And this is helping do that. Then we have another de-esser, but we're not using this as a de-esser. We're using it to target the mid-range. So it's kind of acting a bit like a multi-band compressor would, but only targeting one band, which is around about 2.2K. That's some of that mid-range harshness. It's just helping to compress that particular part of the frequency spectrum. Let's take a listen to what this is doing.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Of feelings, doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
There's something about when I disable it, I kind of go, it's like an energy that's going into my ear that I'm not totally happy with. So that's helping just smooth that out, makes the vocal sound rounder, smoother. You don't have so much of that mid-range harshness. I joke a lot of the time about vocal mixing tutorials and how everyone talks about soothe too all the time. And I feel like this is the moment where everyone's going, why are you not using Soothe 2? I probably just didn't have Soothe 2 at the time. And also, this works. It sounds fine. Happy days. Next up, we have the L2 limiter from Waves. I don't typically use a limiter that often in a vocal chain, but in the case where I want something up front and in your face, I often do it, or where the vocal feels a bit spiky. And that's the case here. The vocal just feels a bit like there's a few kind of spiky moments that I just want to get rid of. And often I use saturation for that, but also we'll use a limiter. In this case, I'm using the L2. Let's take a listen to what difference this is making.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
Again, it's not doing a massive amount of processing. It's just shaving off a bit of the harshness, allowing the vocal to be a bit smoother. What I should say at this point as well is that there's always a trade-off in mixing, particularly when it comes to vocals. If I want the vocals to be up front and in your face and loud and compressed and adding saturation, all of that stuff is going to present problems of its own that we have to deal with. So a lot of this vocal chain is about kind of creating a problem for myself and then correcting it a bit, and then creating another problem for myself and correcting it a bit. And that's totally fine. That's a totally normal way of working. Mixing is not this like linear thing where you go, okay, this is what I want, and I'm just going to make all my decisions. Every time I do some processing, the vocal is going to get better and sound more professional. That's not the way it works. It's, okay, this is where we want to end up in terms of the sound. I'm going to add some things and see where it goes. And at times it's going to go off course and we have to bring it back. But as long as you constantly have that goal in mind of where you want it to be, and you're constantly moving towards that, it doesn't really matter how you get there or what you do to get there, so long as you end up there. And sometimes you might find actually you end up over here and it was better to end up over there. I just really dislike this idea that like there's a wrong way of doing things, because there isn't. There's things that sound shit and there's things that I wouldn't do. But for the most part, anything is on the table. For example, I have an instance of the SSL channel again, and this is a trick that I pull out very occasionally when I can't get anything else to work. At this point, I feel like the vocal is still sounding a bit sibilant. It's still feeling a bit harsh in that sort of 7, 8K area. And we're going to use the SSL to deal with that. If we take a listen to it.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold?
The S's are still a bit too sibilant for me. I want them to be smoother. That compression is really kind of bringing out a lot of the sibilants, and we need to deal with that. And sometimes a de-esser doesn't do the job, and that's when I'll use the SSL channel to deal with that. And we do this by doing this crazy EQ move up here. So we're boosting 12 dB at 8K. We're taking out all of the low mids at like, what's that? 500 hertz, 15 dB at 500 hertz. We're taking that away, and we're filtering everything up to 350 hertz. Which you would look at and go, well, that's crazy. That's going to sound horrible. But the secret here is that we're then sending this EQ to the dynamic sidechain. We're not sending it to the output. So we're not going to hear it. We're just sending it to that sidechain of the compressor that's in the SSL channel. So what that means is the compressor is only going to respond to this boost around about 7K, and it's only going to compress that particular frequency area. So essentially we're using the SSL channel as a multi-band compressor and focusing just on that harshness with it. And because of the snappiness of this compressor and the way that it works, I think it does a really great job of smoothing out the harshness. Let's take a listen to what difference this makes.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold?
All of a sudden, that sibilant sounds much smoother, it sounds more rounded, it doesn't sound as present and as harsh. And this is just a trick that I love. If you're struggling to get your sibilants under control, people will say, well, go in and manually edit it and like bring down all the sibilants and stuff. You can do that. But for me, this is just a much quicker way of working. I really like how the SSL channel just deals with that problem, and I don't have to go in and manually edit it. So last up in the chain, we have an instance of Decapitator, just adding a bit of extra drive, blended in at 64% on the A setting, just to give the vocal a bit of extra edge and help it cut through the mix a bit more.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
So it's just on the point of breakup where it's adding a bit of extra warmth and a bit of grit to the vocal. Okay, so before I wrap this up, I'll just do a quick breakdown of what all of these effects are doing. It looks a bit crazy, but you'll notice that all of these have an intention and everything is there for a reason. So let me break down exactly what these effects are doing. Firstly, we have an instance of the Verb Suite Classics, which is the Bricasti M7 model. We've got a hall, we've got the Amsterdam hall, and it's set to about 1.9 seconds decay time. A bit of pre-delay. There's no EQ happening in this plugin, but it's running into an instance of the SSL channel where we're doing some filtering. We're also taking out some mid-range around about 2K and taking out loads of low mid around about 500 hertz or so. And that reverb sounds like this.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appeal.
And that's helping fill the space behind the vocal, but it's also dark enough that it keeps the vocal up front. And you'll notice with all of this processing, I'm constantly doing moves to ensure that the reverbs and the delays sit behind the vocal so that we honor that intention that we had at the beginning, which is to keep the vocal up front and in the face of the listener. I don't want any of the vocal effects to get in the way of that. They've all got to sit behind the vocal. So that filtering in the SSL channel is helping to achieve that. You can do this with any EQ. I personally just like using the SSL channel EQs. Next up, we have a send that's called Aphex, which at some point would have been the Aphex Vintage Oral Exciter from Waves. But I'm actually using Virtual Mix Rack with an instance of the Shimmer and the Air EQ units. And then that's also going to an instance of Pro Q2, which is filtering out loads of low end, everything below like 1K, which is really steep filter, and then boosting the top end. Then that's going into a de-esser. And this basically acts as like an exciter, which is adding in top end harmonics and a top end bump, but in parallel. And that sounds like this.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
So that's helping bring that clarity, bringing the vocal into the face of the listener and get it to sit above the track in the way that we wanted in the beginning when we made the plan to get the vocal bold and upfront. And that's really helping to do that through this exciter, this harmonic exciter in Revival and this Air EQ adding a bit of extra top end. Next up, we have an instance of H delay. This is set to the lo-fi setting. It's on the lo-fi slap preset actually with some filtering going on in the plugin, 158 milliseconds. And then are we doing anything in the SSL channel? We're also dipping out a little bit of mid-range again in the SSL channel, around about 2K. All of this is done to keep the vocal effects behind the vocal, as I say, and keep the vocal up front. This is what the H delay sounds like.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
A slap delay is a really great way of just getting the vocal to sit in the mix a bit better and help it gel with the instrumental, and that's exactly what that's doing. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. Next up, we have this PP delay track, which is a ping pong delay. We've got some pretty extreme EQ happening before the delay comes in. So again, we're taking out all of this like low mid, low end, everything below 800 hertz, dipping out some more in that 2.5K, which is where the vocal lives. So we're constantly carving space for the vocal in the vocal effects. Then this goes to Echo Boy on the Echoplex setting, which I really like. Ping pong delay mode. And then we're also using a bit of the diffusion just to smear the delay a bit. And that sounds like this.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
I spoke at the top how I wanted the vocal to have this feeling of like there's stuff going on everywhere and it feels a bit overwhelming and life's just kind of coming at you fast. That ping pong delay is really helping to cement that feeling because it brings an energy to the mix and it creates this sort of energy around the vocal where it feels like there's just loads of stuff going on and you're a bit like, oh, everything's a bit overwhelming. That's exactly what we wanted, and that is really helping to bring that feeling to the mix and glue the vocal in with the instrumental because of that energy. Yeah, really like what that's doing. I feel like that brings so much to the vocal sound. Next up, we have this very simple width track, which is again filtering out everything below 1K, boosting a bit of top end, and then sending it to this sample delay, which just adds a bit of dimension and width to the vocal. I joked at the top about people saying, you know, you should feel things, not hear them, and how I didn't like that. But there is a time and a place for that, and this is a good example of when I believe there's a time and a place for that. This is just adding a bit of dimension and a bit of widening to the vocal without being an obvious widener or an obvious doubler or chorusing effect. It's just about giving the vocal a bit more dimension and helping it fill the speakers a bit more. And this is exactly what this does.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
It's subtle, but it helps the vocal feel bigger, feel wider, and fill up more of the space in the stereo field. Last up, we have these two final sends down here. Bus 24 is actually a kind of delay throw that only happens in specific moments. I'm going to enable this automation so that you can see. It happens down here in this gap in the verse, and it happens over here. And then it doesn't happen again in the rest of the song, but it's just about creating these moments of interest. And I love doing this with vocals. It's an instance of Echo Boy, on the Echoplex setting again, 8th note, single echo, but going into Valhalla Shimmer to really smear that and create this sort of bloomy reverb delay throw moment. And that sounds like this.
Work together, making sweet, sweet gold. Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold.
And I love these little delay throw moments in a track because I think that's what takes vocal production from being good to being really good or to being great. And I posted a video about this a little while ago where I talked about how I use these vocal effects moments to really enhance the feeling of a mix. And you can check that video out. I'll put a link up in the top card so that you can check that out after this video. Particularly on pop mixes like this where you want to create moments of interest, that's the thing that's going to elevate your vocal sound to the next level. I've also got a much quicker way of doing this now. I used to have to do this where I'd set up this send and then like put in these automation moments, pencil them in. But now in Logic, I've created a tool for just doing this instantly. You can check that out in that video as well. Just makes this whole process much quicker if you're a Logic user. Next up, we have this Bus 19, which is another reverb. This time, the Verb Suite Classics again. We're doing some EQ on this, taking out all of this low mid and this low frequency down here. And then that is the FG 480, so the Lexicon 480, large and stage, hall, about 2.2 seconds. And that only comes in at the end of the track. So right in this final chorus, you'll see that this plate 2 return track is brought up in volume. And that sounds like this.
I only ask 'cause I'm driving so fast in this room. But when I drink to you. All the money and the time I lose. All the money and the time I lose. But when I drink to you. All the money and the time I lose. All the money and the time I lose.
That helps that end section to feel massive and feel like it blooms and explodes into this big, huge kind of reverby space. So let's take a listen to what we've done, our AB, the dry vocal with the process vocal, and you can see what a difference all of this has made.
Every time I look at the ceiling, it's like every thought in my mind's freewheeling. Why can't they crawl out and work together, making sweet, sweet gold? Not got a job, but I've got a lot of feelings. Doesn't do a lot to make me appealing. I see stars everywhere, but can never take cold. So how's it supposed to be? How it's supposed to be? If you were me, you'd see it differently. I only ask 'cause I'm driving so fast. Something's gotta give soon. But when we're burning up, I feel so enough. Tell me every single thing in the world was built for us. I only ask 'cause I'm driving so fast in this room. But when I drink to you. All the money and the time I lose. All the money and the time I lose.
So you can hear what a difference all of this processing has made. And the reason it's made that difference is because we stuck to the rules that we set out at the beginning. So to recap, know exactly how you want your vocal to feel. Forget all of the technical stuff for a second. Forget how things sound. What is the feeling that you want to evoke with the vocal in your mix? And lead with that, because that is what defines everything. And this is baked into my thinking all of the time. I'm always working on things based on a feeling. And people ask me questions like, when it comes to my vocal chain packs, they say, does this work in this genre? Can I get it to sound like this artist? But I don't create any of those vocal chains based on genre or sounding like a specific artist. They're based on starting points for feelings that I want them to evoke. And if you've bought any of my packs, you'll see this based on the names of the presets. So when you go into a mix, don't go into it thinking, how do I get my vocal to sound like a pop mix? Or how do I get my vocal to sound professional? Or how do I get it to sound like this artist or that artist? Go into it thinking, how can I get my vocal to feel right for the track? And once you start thinking that way, you'll realize that thinking things like, oh, the professional way to deal with dynamics is to use clip gain before compression every single time, so I should do that. Or the professional way to use reverbs is to sidechain it to the vocal, so I need to do that. Or I can't use a stock EQ, I have to use Pro Q, and every band on Pro Q should be dynamic. But all of that is bollocks. As you saw from my mix, there's not a single dynamic EQ on this mix. There's no Soothe 2. I'm not clip gaining anything. I'm not sidechaining any reverbs. I'm slamming the vocal with compression. I'm using an SSL channel strip as a de-esser. But it worked. The song did really well. And why did it do really well? Because nobody in the real world cares about any of that stuff. They just care that the song makes them feel something. So focus on how you want the mix to feel above all else. Then make sure that you edit the vocal in a way that removes any distractions from that feeling, and anything that's not helping the vocal get to that point where it's connecting with the listener, get rid of it. There should be no distractions in the vocal. The vocal should be as good as it can possibly sound before you even begin mixing. And then when you start mixing, make sure that every single mixing move that you make is there to serve the song and there to enhance the feeling of the vocal performance, and that you're not just doing things for the sake of doing them because you saw on a YouTube video that you should be doing this particular mixing technique, or you heard that you need this plugin and this piece of gear in order to get the vocal to sound as good as it possibly can. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is, are you serving the feeling of the song and the emotion of the performance? And that's what's going to get your mixes to connect with the listener. And if you want to see how I use vocal effects in mixes to help the vocal connect with the listener and create emotion using a range of different vocal effects, including some of the delay throw stuff that I talked about earlier, then check out this next video right now.